Today I'm tidying up the workshop, which is also the first tip. Okay, I don't mean that my workshop's a tip. I mean, try to keep your workshop tidy. Even though my workshop is sometimes a bit of a tip, it tends to happen. You finish jobs off and don't put everything away exactly where it should go. And also, you tend to accumulate things over time, keep things handy, and gradually the mess builds up. So, in order to avoid not being able to find anything and working in a dirty, messy environment, I recommend trying to put things away after each job. It really is much easier to find things when you need them, when everything's in its place, and then you know where it all is. It also gives you more space to work and a nicer working environment. Plan to work around the weather and seasons. This depends, of course, on the facilities that you have available. If you have somewhere where you can work undercover, then that makes things much easier for boat building purposes. For some jobs, such as working with epoxy resin, you really need it to be dry, warm, and to have good ventilation in your working environment. So, therefore, it makes sense to save the fine day jobs for fine days. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, but really this can dictate your schedule over the course of the year. During the winter days, these tend to be much shorter. The light isn't as good. It's colder, of course, so it can be harder to work with materials like epoxy, and it's not going to go off as well. And it just generally makes things more difficult. So do bear in mind that you'll need to schedule your work around the weather and the seasons. Try to have working space around the boat. Okay, this is the reason that I firstly measured where I was going to be building the Pocketship, which was mostly in the garage, but then decided to put wheels on the trolley to move the boat in and out. Because for some jobs, you just really need the extra space around the boat. And I very quickly started to become envious of people with large workshops who have plenty of room around the boat to move materials about, to stand back and look at the boat, and to arrange your tools and equipment around the boat whilst you're working on it. Having only just enough space to move around the boat in the garage made some jobs very difficult, very much more time consuming, or in some cases pretty much impossible, like painting the waterline. Have other jobs lined up for leftover epoxy. When you make a mix of epoxy resin to carry out a particular task, try to have some other jobs that you'd be able to use any excess epoxy on, because more often than not I found that even making a minimal amount of epoxy resin, I usually had some left over. So it's good to put this to good use rather than it going to waste. And of course this makes sense financially as well. Take your time. Don't rush things. The whole point of building the boat is to enjoy the process and to learn from it. And both of these things can be achieved much more effectively if you take your time. Okay, some things are time pressured, particularly when using epoxy resin. Even these jobs you can break down into smaller chunks usually, and make sure you get the preparation right, and make sure you leave yourself time to finish things off properly, to spend time going over those details and getting things just right, rather than being in a rush. I promise you, if you're rushing things, then you won't enjoy the process nearly half as much. I hope that something that I've learned through the experience of building the Pocketship has been to take things more slowly and really focus on the task in hand and not be too anxious and too much in a rush to get on to the next step. This tip is particularly important for tasks like fiberglassing or sanding. If you're in a rush doing them, it can really ruin things. Whereas if you take your time, you can really enjoy the process and get a lot more satisfaction from it. Expect to get things wrong. No matter how good you are, no matter how careful you are, you will get things wrong, especially when you're building a boat for the first time. So you can mentally prepare yourself for this by expecting it to happen. Expect that you will have to do some things again. And if you find yourself getting cross or really frustrated, then just take a break to try and calm yourself down. Give yourself time to think. I mean, I found this time and again that the solution to a problem wasn't immediately apparent, but if I stepped back and even went and did something else for a while, then usually I could work out a solution or a couple of different ways of doing things, and then I could come back to the problem fresh and much calmer, and this usually resulted in being able to solve the problem.